Yes. That's right. That's right, Councillor. Thank you, everybody. Welcome to the Strategy and Policy Committee meeting of Wednesday, the 8th of May. Start with a.
You're echoing.
Yes, I know. I don't know why. My dulcet tones, double vision.
Does that make it? Do you feel guilty?
Are we good?
No, I think so.
Is that better?
It was me.
It's not better.
Can we just check everyone's devices muted, like on the bottom of the screen?
You.
I can mute mine again for the third time if you like.
We do.
I don't have the master control switch, so I
Don't like that kind of voice.
No,
Sounds like you're
Jeremy,
angry.
have a wee look. What does that say?
Can we continue, councillors? I think we'll. Karakia this morning. Tutawa mai I runga, tutawa mai I raro, tutawa mai I roto, tutawa mai I waho. Ki kau te Māori tū, te Māori ora, te katoa. Haumi e, hui e, tai ki e. Thank you, everybody. Apologies. Perhaps one for lateness from Councillor Pemberton. He's in the building. Chairman, is he? Yeah. Thank you. Somebody like to move those?
It's Stuart.
Oh, Stuart, sorry. Thanks, Anne. Thanks, Councillor McPhail, seconded Councillor Gibson. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Declarations of interest. Public forums, petitions, deputations, not that I'm aware of. Notification, confirmation of minutes from the 27th of March. Had those to look at. So if you'd like to move those, please. Thank you, Councillor Morrison. Seconded Councillor McPhail. Any corrections, changes? Fantastic. Those then, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. And agenda item 6 is a notification of extraordinary items, and you should have had a supplementary report tabled this morning with relation to the extension of the LPP consultation closing date. Is there anybody who doesn't have that?
It's all right. I can shoot. It's
Might
okay.
quite look it up before you move it. That's fine. Thanks, Councillor. That'll come in. Thanks, Chairman Horrell. That will come in item 10 at extraordinary urgent business. Is that clear? Great. We have a mover and seconder. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Right, questions, none. No written questions. Chairman's report and councillor's report. At this very moment, but I'll probably remember something later, so you might have to indulge me. Any councillors got reports to make?
Probably could just do one. I went to the South Balance Farm and Environmental Award winners. The Miller family. Miller's out at Glencoe, that area here. Next door. Yeah. Titipu. And great turnout, amazing property, amazing farmers. Done a lot of work around fencing off areas from biodiversity and mitigations, ponds and things. So just really, it was a good day. Everybody was really quite impressed by it. And they've done a bit of work with radiometrics with Clint Risman through the Makaririwa catchment. And as Clint said, the, who's coming out here to analyse the soils and say, right, this is what you need to do, and he basically said they've done it. So there was a lot of work already being done on the property about the mitigations and obviously the runoff and things like that. So actually I thoroughly enjoyed. I had Te Ao Marama, Nikki, and representatives Renee with us, and it was really good, and Fiona from our team, and just yarning about farming and why people do things and everything. It was really good conversation actually. So no, it was a great day, and just need to promote those sort of farming entities and what they're doing. All good.
Thanks, Councillor. Anybody else? Chairman Horrell?
Yeah, just like to acknowledge the passing of Derek Angus, who was MP and long-term regional council member. I think Eric and I will attend that funeral this afternoon, which will put a little bit of pressure on the extraordinary meeting, but I'm sure Jeremy can stand in if we have to get out of the door before that. And thanks for the support of people going, we've been attending a number of LTP discussions around the countryside, and we look forward to seeing the submissions in the Mark the extension coming up. So I think we acknowledge that next week the democracy play out. So I think that's probably about all. Thanks.
Thanks, Chairman. Yes, please pass on our condolences. Right, do we need to move those reports? Yes, we do. Someone like to move those verbal reports, please? Thanks, Councillor Morrison. Seconded, Councillor Gibson. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Right, that takes us to item 9.1. Which is an update on the Beyond 2025 long-term plan, and it's a real pleasure to welcome Bobby Brown to give us that update. Thanks, Bobby. Welcome. I think you know everybody.
Not everybody, but I do, in case you remember a rock.
I'd like to be under a rock some days.
We can arrange that.
Yeah. A nice boulder. Although Easter's past.
Okay, so lovely to be here, and thank you very much for the opportunity. I know your time is precious at the moment with LTP and everything going on. But look, what I've been doing is we're obviously into about year 10 of implementation of the first year of Beyond 2025. So what I've been just doing is making sure everybody's aware of what's happening at a regional level with the priorities, and then we'll be finished the first year in a couple of months, and there'll be a 12-month report then. So this is just a really high-level update of 10 key things from the piece of work, and I'm just probably going to take 10 minutes, maybe 15, just to whip through it. The first thing I just want to mention is around regional opportunities and advocacy, because there's lots going on in Wellington, as we know. So what Great South had quite a key role to do is to try to coordinate a lot of the thinking that came through Beyond 25. So a lot of it was grounded in the consultation and the research, but we're just trying to put it into the language or the way, if there's new funds or policy that will resonate with government. So there's a number of these papers which your staff have very generously been contributing towards, which just provide like a 2 or 3 page synopsis of what we've been doing, where we want to go, and then what help we might need, whether it be a change to a piece of policy or access to a fund. So there'll be more on this coming up, but just to mention that that's quite a key thing at the moment while there's talk about regional deals and how the government wants to work with us. So this table basically summarises everything. So if you remember from Beyond 25, we had those 4 sections, which talked about enablers, it talked about people, economy, and environment. And what we did about 8 months ago was we said, right, we're not going to do all 64 recommendations in a year, but what are the most important ones? And that is what those little red numbers are. So I'm just going to whip through them really quickly to give you an update, but I'm happy to take any questions at the end. So first of all, housing. So just to reiterate the 2 key things here, the houses that we have are not currently meeting the needs of our population, and housing is a key reason why we can't fill our workforce shortage. So what are we doing? We have activated a process which looks like that, and it's a whole of region process, because we can't be siloed as councils, because remember how people live. They may live in one council area but work in another, but go to a doctor in another. So we've got to look at how people actually live. And this is really important to work alongside our Papatipu Rūnaka, because Papakainga housing, there's a lot of that going on. But it's also just to make sure that what we do ask for, that it gets a lot of weight behind it. So we're not diluting the messaging from Southland. Remember that other areas of the country have a larger problem in terms of number of houses. So Waikato, for example, they're 34,000 houses short. We're probably only a couple of thousand. So it's not a numbers game, because we've also got the second largest region. You know, so, and remember, our issue is the quality of our homes. 3/4 of them were built prior to 1980. So we have to work hard to get them healthy and heated. Okay, so there are 5 things that will be finished by end of June, and the red ones are the ones that are most important. So we will have an action plan. So Beyond 25 talked about all the research, and we talked to developers, real estate, community. We asked people where they want to live in the future. We did a full audit of all the housing, and we come up with the data that showed us what the deal is. So now we're going to turn that into what are the 5 to 10 key things that we do as a region, because we can't do everything. That will line up to what the councils are up to, because a lot of that is linked to zoning, spatial planning, regulation about where our people are going to live, as well as what the government will do in terms of the outcome of the Kāinga Ora housing review, which is due this week, which could be a huge, significant change to how housing, is actually looked at from a national point of view. So that housing action plan is underway, and you'll see that in July. We're actually looking at holding a housing forum in July, and I'll check with Lucy and Rachel around dates that might fit you guys, because there's going to be change no matter what. And we've got what we need. You know, we've gone through a process, but we need Wellington officials in particular, not ministers, to actually then come and show us how they can help us. So we think the best way to do that is to hold a bit of a forum where we all get together. The data and insights will be covered through the repository, and local government is extremely important because of all the pressures at the moment in terms of planning, regulatory, LTPs. So what and how you fund infrastructure or the enable, because councils can be providers of housing, enablers of housing, or have a regulatory function, and you are all very different. So we've been working one-on-one with each council. Okay, so all that table there shows is that we've just tried to make sure it all lines up in terms of who does what, so we're not falling over each other, and that's one table, but that's taken a wee bit to get. But again, we're quite committed to making sure we deliver what we say we're going to deliver by when we say it. Okay, the next slide talks about, if I can click it on, central government again, and this is just what I talked about before with that advocacy, but there are some key things that we have been talking to government about, and things like flexibility in the national policy statement for highly productive land. Isolated communities that don't have a nearby population area where people can live and then come to work, you know, so Te Anau, Stewart Island. And then there's some issues with tourism because it has rebounded quicker, and we've got pressure on Airbnb and that sort of thing as well. Yeah. So Anne definitely knows that because that's a lot in Fiordland at the moment. So 13 to 16% of all their houses are actually Airbnb, and there's a lot of absentee landowners, and that has a whole lot of run-on implications. Okay, and the other key thing is around how I talked about retrofitting homes, making sure they're healthy, and not just complying with the Healthy Homes Act, but actually giving people, you know, really nice places to live, because you might attract people here, but if the house is gross, they don't stay. Okay, so moving on quick. The other point is around commercial accommodation, which links to housing. Our problem in Southland is that we do not have enough commercial beds. So we had probably the most iconic destination with Milford Sound, and Stewart Island's not far behind, but we only have 2,690 rooms in our whole region. So what that means is when you get a couple of big business events in Invercargill, we're chocker. And what that also means is you don't necessarily want to have accommodation out in places where people go because you want to protect that, so it's about how you manage the journey. However, it's an issue because what's happening is it's overspilling into Airbnb because people still want to come here. They can't get a bed, so people put their houses on and they get lots of money. So we cannot exclude that from looking at this big picture. But it's good. It's a good problem to have because we've got the money coming in, which is what we want to help our retailers and our businesses. So just to summarise really quick with housing, it's the highest priority for the councils. That's what they've told me. Ageing population is, and we will see the census results soon, but we are ageing quicker than we thought. That's the first. Sorry, not all of us, not looking at you. But remember, we did.
Council makes me feel like I'm aging quickly.
But yeah, remember we've got to make sure our houses fit for who we are in the future, and we projected mid-2030s that we'd have a larger proportion of older folk. It's happening quicker. So really important because the housing we have has to meet whoever our people are. Okay, we'll talk about employers, but it's still a barrier. While it has turned a bit, it's still challenging. It's not a numbers game. It's getting the right people in the right house. The Kāinga Ora review I talked about, highly productive land and spatial planning. I love that Marcus Roy is here because spatial planning is the absolute key, in the work that ES is trying to do there, because that will talk about where people live, what jobs they have, what infrastructure we need, and where we actually make our communities rather than just talking about houses as homes. Okay, let's work. That was housing really quick. Workforce really quick. We're 2.7% unemployment. We fluctuate and we annualise it to about 3%, so just over 3%. We're still pretty low. It's complex because we're seasonal. So what we can do at the moment is monitor it, but we have looked at different industries and what their employment needs might be. That's all we can do at the moment because it's so intrinsically linked to housing and other things. But I won't go into that too much. The third one is data. So this is our partnership with Environment Southland staff, and we're very appreciative of the work of Rachel, Lucy, Jane Carroll. So what we're doing is basically saying, look, we have to make it easier to find the information about our region. And whether you're a farmer, whether you're a government agency that is going to invest in the region in housing or roading, or whether you're a school kid just wanting to know the population of the region. It's very fragmented. You don't know sometimes what data you're looking at when it got updated. So the big thing we're creating is something called a data hub or regional data hub. So it's the data repository you might have heard me talking about. It will be on a website that'll be like datasouthland.co.nz, let's say, and it will be made by end of June. So progress is going really well. Yeah, really a lot more to it than what I've just said, because we identified lots of problems through Beyond 25, so we've been quite focused on trying to plug those gaps. So Kāinga Ora, you're not investing in housing. Why? And the data, right, we'll get to you. Okay, so we'll come back to that because there could be opportunities for shared services coming up too, just to try to have cost efficiencies around how we all treat data and share information. Okay, energy, really quickly. We have the regional energy strategy, which has been completed. A big part of that is around new renewable energy generation. And remember, that thing looked at where it was most appropriate to have different types of energy. There has been significant interest from energy companies about investing in Southland. So we're just working through a lot of them. The other part of this is the decarbonisation, because you would have seen Fonterra, like a lot of our big guys, are converting their fossil fuel boilers to renewable sources, which is great, and that needs to continue. So energy is massive, and it's bigger than just waiting to see what Tiwai does with their 600 megawatts. Remember, the biggest thing we don't like about that is the uncertainty it creates for the private sector. So once we just have a call on what that's going to be, that will be the best thing, because we've got options both ways, whether they stay or whether they go. Okay, In terms of regulatory planning, I won't touch this one too much, but remember the plan just said, look, if we're going to have aquaculture and try to get $1 billion, the rules need to allow it to happen. So let's just make sure we look at both at the same time.
Is there a conflict between that role and regional council's role?
With regulatory?
Yeah.
Sorry, I should have gone over it. Yeah, so it was just the previous regional development strategy didn't have any regulatory considerations. So it had a whole lot of really cool aspirational goals, but it didn't talk about the rules. So it's not saying Great South is doing it. It's just saying from a regional development point of view, if you're going to have things that you want to happen, you've got to understand how the rules will enable or not enable that to happen. So, for example, we talked to, and this is all in partnership with all the councils, so this isn't just Great South, but we talked about the importance of regional variation. So a lot of the rules, so think of the highly productive land, top down, one size fits all. It didn't fit all because we're all quite different. And so that had a flow-on impact to where we had housing, how we looked at where we might have land use diversification. The spatial planning was in there, and then talking about also alignment between strategies and policy, because sometimes you get this energy strategy, but how does that then fit into the consideration of the ETS and agriculture or the adaptation planning? It's a connection. Does that make sense, Morris?
Councillors, can I just get you to keep the questions till the end and through me, please?
Oh, I'm almost finished, Linda, I promise. Okay, so this is, water is another key project, number 7, and I've only got 10, which is in partnership with Environment Southland. And this came from industry point of view. So it was based, everybody through the plan said water is so important. Some of their larger exporters and processors said, look, we're a little bit worried about if we've got water, if there's resilience in the water assets, and we're not telling you how to regulate it, but we just want to have a voice. So this piece of work was about saying, right, let's do a bit of an investigation by talking to industry about, so not in a regulatory setting, but just saying to them, right, how you going? What are your plans? What are your future plans? Do you have, it was basically just trying to get information. So there'll be a lot more to that water plan because it obviously connects straight into a lot of the work that Lucy and Rachel and you guys are up to, and it definitely won't replace any water and land plans regulatory. Think of it more like an industry perspective and for them to be involved. Okay. And the last, aquaculture. So aquaculture has become, actually not become, it's always been quite important. But there seems to be quite a lot of interest from government around this particular opportunity. Remember, from the plan, agriculture remains extremely important. So 70% of everything that we make is exported. And we are highly 7.3 billion turnover is our GDP. Of that, about 3.95 can be attributed to agricultural manufacturing. So that is our foundation. However, the two opportunities that we brought up were aquaculture and tourism. So those are the two that we think can add to that, and we can do it with less risk. Aquaculture talks about Southland producing 1/3 of what the national target is. That can happen over time, and that may be conservative, but that will depend a lot on both open ocean and land-based aquaculture. So it's not just Kananui off the coast of Stewart Island. It's actually what's happening down at Bluff and seaweed, lots of different things. So this is also about enabling the private sector to do their bit, like this is them driving it. So what we want to do is just make sure we give a really good environment for them to operate in and understand what that looks like, as well as thinking, right, what workforce do you need? What supply chain businesses need to be there? Infrastructure. So I've simplified that lots, but you can see how that's a big one. So the big thing we're doing at the moment is we're just starting the regional aquaculture strategy, which will link into the national piece of work, which government's very interested in, because remember, they like to fund things that come out of strategies because they've been through consultation and they know that then someone down the road isn't going to turn up and go, we should fund that. They can see how it relates. Okay, second last one, export, and this is just about supporting our exporters because they're such a key part of our economy. They often get missed, not that they need help because they're normally big guys, but it's just around understanding supply chain infrastructure linked to that water conversation. Transport is another big one, which I know you guys are highly interested in, and there's been a lot of regulation lately with the GPS as well as the Regional Land Transport Plan. So again, all we're doing is looking at it from an economic lens, and from these businesses going, well, what do they need for transport? One of the big things that's popping up is the fact that a lot of it's not multimodal. So some of the ways transport is planned is Southport is separate to the Invercargill Airport, Regional Land Transport, there's a bit of Kiwi Rail in there too. So there was a piece of work done in 2005 which looked at the big picture. So if I need to get some stuff off a farm to a port, how does that work? But we still think that there are parts of our supply system which are underutilised, for example, air, but we can't get more flights or try to get freight up until we have that data to actually be able to encourage private sector to do it. Okay, and last one was just a bit of agriculture. I feel like I stuck that in there just because I had the slide. But look, this is a very, very big part of what the region is about. We've done a lot of work through Beyond 25 where we talked about, and I use that word, evolve. But we're thinking about the fact that the people who farm are changing. Look at Jeremy, it's a long day from when I used to rouse you in your But, it's not fighting it, it's accepting it, it's trying to understand how we enable farmers, the technology, linking up to different uses of land, how we really try to push that with the data, or how we allow people to make their own decisions. And so everyone plays a big role in that. We're just making sure it's not forgotten as we look at all these other bits because it's our bread and butter. And that is it. Sorry, I was 15. But
Right.
hopefully
One
now
moment.
you've got a.
Thank you. Eric, you put your hand up a long time ago.
Oh, that's all right. Thank you, Bobby, for your update and good to see so much activity. Questions about housing, and some time ago we were informed there was a large development going to take place down Rockdale Road east of the Marae. What's happening there? Is that still going ahead? Because there were several hundred houses in that proposal.
Yep, through the chair, yes it is. So the ICC is trying to talk to those guys about options because things have changed. So as far as I know, that is still happening. And it's been talked about there being more houses there.
Are there some hold-ups that we should be involved in, or is that?
Not that I'm aware of. I feel like it's on the other side.
Councillor Rodway.
Oh, thank you. Yes, Bobby, I noticed with some concern actually on about a second or third last slide there where you said that trees don't go to school or volunteer in the fire brigade, which is a negative comment on the role of forestry in the community. And I'd hate to think that Great South was negative about forestry in that regard. And it looks like from that slide that you have, forestry has a very important role, as you know, to play, not to take over the province, but to be an integrated part of our development and reaching carbon neutral by 2050.
Yeah, so through the chair, you are absolutely right, and that is definitely not what is in Beyond 25 or where Great South sit. So we see forestry as a significant contributor to the economy. We want the manufacturing to happen in the region. We want to look at opportunities. It's about, sorry to steal the phrase, right tree, right place. So where you're using productive land for forestry, it may not be the best use of that land because obviously it goes around in circles. It's going to affect your export, your GDP, employment. So Beyond 25, very clear, forestry is a key industry. There was the modelling of if 50% of productive land was converted to carbon forestry, that report was done. And that was just done to go, right, peg in the sand, if that happened, what would happen? And we modelled that on the impact on GDP, workforce, housing and population. Because we don't know what the future will be, but we've got to start to try to understand to be able to plan before it was a bit sad.
Bobby, cows don't go to school either. So Morris is putting it shouldn't be in there,
Thank you,
that
Councillor.
phrase.
Councillor McDonald.
You're absolutely right, Morris. It's an emotive piece of land which really needs to be taken out. It doesn't align up with Great South's work around carbon zero. going sometime, so I just suggest that.
No worries.
I
Thank
just
you.
want to ask you a question about opportunities for energy. How far have you gone? Have you gone throughout the region looking at opportunities for, say, for instance, solar energy on land?
Correct.
And where they could, so that, we need that information. Yeah.
Yep, so if you guys, through the chair, sorry, if you would like a full report on the regional energy strategy, Steve Kenny could come and provide you, because there's something like 20 odd inputs went into that plan, so a whole lot of technical work. So I can't speak to those technical reports, but I do know that they did that work.
Is it something like you could share with Thriving South, and just to see where there could be opportunities for landowners around the region?
Yes, so Thriving South have been a part of the energy group right from the start. So there was an advisory group of lots of different stakeholders, including councils, iwi, private sector, and Thriving South have been on that. So, yep, definitely.
Thank you.
Councillor Crichton?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Bobby, how do you reconcile a focus on tourism and increasing tourism and your obligations around reducing greenhouse gases in the region?
Yeah, it's an awesome question. And I think it's probably not for us to make that call. So Great South is asked through the statement of intent process, on areas to focus on. At the moment, tourism is there. I feel like there's also a conversation around, we've got limitations with how many people we can have. So while I talked about those number of commercial beds being low, actually that does help keep the numbers, at a manageable level, so the carrying capacity. And even places like Sturt Island, it's really important. You can only get 40,000 people to the island because of the accommodation and the transport. So I feel like there's some natural controls in there, which means that we're not going to be dealing with a runaway sort of tourism experience, and the pressure has been to manage the place to get more out of it and to spread it to where people want. So in terms of that other question, around how that fits with decarbonisation, I feel like at the moment we're trying to manage tourism growth sustainably, with those principles. So things that we do with the decarbonisation workshop. So trying to get tourism operators upskilled into that. And then at the same time, we're still working with you guys around trying to just measure that abatement pathway for the region, and focus on the transport, industrial and agriculture are the three key parts of that. But it's a really good question and probably just above my pay grade, I think, to answer.
Thank you.
Yeah. I have an easy question.
Still well. Councillor McPhail?
Yeah, just to bring a little balance to the discussion about the reality in regards to the trees. The reality is that trees on a FTE point of view are a lot less full-time employees in forestry than anything else, really. So and we want more people living in our province because it makes life a lot easier to pay the bills. And I know it's sort of very easy to put the boot into dairy, but dairy brought a lot of people into the province to work. So we've got to have a balance here, councillors Rodney and Guyton.
That doesn't sound very balanced.
Well, you're saying that we don't want, dairy doesn't.
I've seen a comment like that about
But
dairy.
it's just, I understand what they're trying to say, that it takes people out of our area if there's not a different thing. We can all plant trees. All farmers probably do very well planting trees. Won't be anybody here. We don't need to employ anyone. And, so that's the reality of it. So.
Thank you for your.
What nonsense.
Just
Go and talk
from
to the
me,
top
thank
of
you.
everything.
Thank you, councillors.
Yes.
Bobby, on the housing and actually right across all the things, education, especially in the urban setting, opportunities for education also are impacted by housing, right? So is there some work being done with the Ministry of Education, because, the schools that were closed are no longer the local school, which has distorted our communities. So is there some work, what's going on there in those conversations?
Yeah, no, it's a really good point. I'll take that back and we'll put it in the mix with regional action plan. It's just the housing covers, from homelessness through to, not having the right executive housing for workforce, through to social emergency housing, you know, so when you touch one bit of the spectrum, it touches another bit, you know, so the solution with housing isn't that we build 100 houses and we're fixed. It's going to be that there's lots of different things happen across different parts of housing, and that all we can do is try to understand who's going to be our people and what kind of houses they're going to need, and try to encourage private sector to develop that going forward. It's a hard one.
Councillor McDonald, last one, thanks.
Thank you very much. Just want to talk about, had that picture of Southport up there, and you're talking about exporting when it comes to that. Any thinking around importation using, I'm talking more like coastal shipping. We're seeing severe stress on international shipping. You know, our depot points in this country might reduce down. So I'm just saying, what about goods coming in? Do we ever give any thought to that, or we just accept that they all come down on the trucks down the roads?
Yeah, so through Lyndall, yeah, really good point. So part of that transport strategy, which had freight at the end, is talking about freight and how we can have efficiencies by having mobile, you know, depots, you know, where there's sharing of infrastructure or, you know, amenities. So that has started between Southport and Invercargill Airport, because it's got to be these guys, you know, they're the ones that, and at the moment it hasn't progressed too far yet till probably we move that work, but it's a really good point.
Thanks. Lucy's got something to
Just very
comment.
quickly on that one specifically, Councillor, there's a lot of work happening at the moment with the RLTPs, and the RTC committees as well are looking at this specific project. So I know that Russell was intending to come and do an update to a future S&P, and Liz is sitting in the back, so maybe we could pick that up as a separate item if you'd like specific feedback about the work that Russell and Dean are both doing in terms of those transport priorities and how it connects. Connection points really important, if that would help.
Oh, you know, that's very good. We talk about our exports, but we need a significant amount of inputs to create those exports too. We need.
Yeah, so just one quick. It's a really good point, because when we've been talking to Air New Zealand about getting more freight capacity, we can get stuff out. We can fill that easy, especially on the A320s. We just can't fill it coming in. You know, so then understanding that means that you work with the other end of the supply chain, you know, to bring it in. So, you know, you did right, it goes hand in hand.
Thanks. So that would be an action for next time. Thanks, Lucy. Chairman Horrell, did you have a question?
It was more just to thank Bobby for coming in and giving us the update. I mean, Beyond 25, it is future focused, and it is about sustainability for everything. I think we actually should be talking about, we've talked about having the right tree in the right place. We actually want the right house in the right place too. And with climate change management retreat, there needs to be a really good focus on that. And I guess the spatial planning combined with climate change is going to be a good tool to do that. So yeah, thanks for coming in this morning and giving us the update. And of course, this is the refresh of Swords that, so the Beyond 25 is refresh to go on. So well done, you're doing a good job.
Thanks, Chairman. Thanks, Bowie. Would somebody like to move the receipt of that report, please? Thanks, Councillor McPhail. Seconded. Councillor Gibson. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Thanks very much, Bobby. Really appreciate your time. Right, moving on to item 9.2, which is follows on nicely from the conversation about housing and healthy homes. In part, anyway, the science update for the air quality monitoring. Thanks, Nick. Just excuse me while I get a plug to.
Yeah, everyone, is the presentation already preloaded on here?
Oh, really? Thank you, Councillor. That would be nice to have.
It's not mine, but I'll let you use it.
Oh, thank you. Generosity is overwhelming.
Apologies, there was just a preloaded presentation, it's just not on here yet.
Some other kind of preloaded.
There was nothing sort of major.
With a 19-year-old in my house, preloading means something completely different.
It'll be hard to fish through. It's nice to see everyone again. Thank you for having me again. I'm going to talk to you briefly today on some new data I have for PM 2.5 first, and then I'm going to talk to you about some preliminary data we have for the nitrogen dioxide, new measurements that we have there. I'll keep going and we'll just visualize because I'm going to talk about why. So why would we actually first of all discuss PM 2.5 nitrogen dioxide? Well, one of the principal reasons for actually discussing these two is the fact that the WHO, World Health Organization, recently updated its guidelines from 2007 to 2021. And these new guidelines have actually dropped both nitrogen dioxide levels by 75%. And these are guideline values, which basically globally, these are actually followed in regulations across the globe. So they dropped it annually from 40 micrograms per cubic meter every year to 10 micrograms per cubic meter. Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you. Moreover, PM 2.5, they've actually dropped the daily value for PM 2.5, even though we don't have one, a regulatory value in this country at the moment. There was going to be, and there is a proposed value of 25 micrograms per cubic meter over a day. They've actually dropped that now down to 15 micrograms per cubic meter. So I think, given these new guidance, I think it's pertinent that we actually look to see how well Invercargill would do on these values. So I'm going to start, first of all, as soon as it comes up, to look at the PM 2.5 values. What I've actually done for PM 2.5, rather than just show you why we would look at PM 2.5, which is 2.5 micrograms and smaller, basically, in size, what I would actually do is actually look at security alert. I've got something different on mine than you've got on yours. Oh, so you're gonna, I can use yours. So I thought you might be interested to see what the actual particles look like, first of all. I thought this might be an interest to you. Yeah. So what we're going to look at here, first of all, before I start looking at the data for you, is I thought you might be interested to see what the actual particles look like. It's quite interesting to actually find out because they actually, what they actually look like is how they actually affect you toxicologically. So if you look at the PM2 particles at the front, you'll see they're all kind of naturally derived. So you've got sea salt on the left, soil and pollen. These are all under transmission electron microscope, magnetized many thousands of times. And you can see they're very large, generally speaking. They're very few in number, but they are heavy. The top ones generally are our summertime particulates. They are, largely speaking, the mass in our measurements over the summer. The ones on the bottom are generally combustion processes. These make up the majority of our PM 2.5 particulates. These are generally combustion orientated. They're motor vehicles, which is petrol on the left-hand side, carbonaceous clusters, which is, actually speaking, diesel, that's our middle, and then wood burner on the right. What you can actually see is there's generally agglomerates, they're small little tar balls, and there's many of them, and they are very, very small. The one in the middle, 50 nanometers. These little tar balls that you see, they often split off and they'll actually separate away. They're agglomerate clusters, but they'll often separate away. Now, if you think that the average cold virus is about 100 to 120 nanometers, they're smaller than a virus, some of these little agglomerates, which means they can travel through the body like a virus. And this is why, one of the main reasons why they are so potent toxicologically. I just thought it'd be nice to actually explain that before we go into why we would look at it. So I've already explained on these new guidelines that we have. The PM 2.5 has dropped down, 25, which we're going to talk about now. And then after that, we'll discuss the new nitrogen dioxide data that we have. So we actually put new instruments that can look at PM 2.5 in both Pomona Street in Invercargill and Main Street in Gore, 2019. So we've now got 5 years worth of data for both sets. This is real-time data collected every 10 minutes. Given that, we can start to do a mean average over a period of time, as well as we can start to look at a trend over time. So what I did is actually looked at the proposed 25 microgram standard, which New Zealand is considering at the moment, and also that new guideline value from WHO of 15 to see how, first of all, Invercargill and then Gore would do set against those two standards, given our 5 years worth of data. So the box on the bottom actually shows the number of times we would have exceeded on the left-hand side the 25 microgram standard, and on the right-hand side of the box the 15 micrograms. And over the last 5 years, we exceeded the 24-hour standard 23 times on average, while for the more stringent 15 microgram per cubic meter mass, we have exceeded it over 58 times on average over the past 5 times. The plot on the right-hand side actually shows, it's quite complicated, but it actually shows that there is a decrease in trend in the PM2.5 concentrations over that period. And if you remember me presenting last year, I said about the PM10 significantly decreasing over time. So the PM2.5 is following, but it's slightly slower than it is with the PM10, probably because of the combustion processes that are actually leading. And it's a major contributor. So GOR also is significantly reducing in concentrations for PM2.5. And as you can see, the concentrations are actually far lower. The amount of exceedances for the 25 microgram cubic meter is actually down to 11 times over the past 5 years, which is not too bad, I guess. But there is a significant reduction. So we're only down to 5 exceedances on that 25 microgram level in 2023. If we look now at the more stringent 15 microgram per cubic meter, you can see we've got dropped from 2019, 2020 from 61 times we'll exceed that 50 micrograms and 70 in 2020 down to 20 and 44. So there's a significant reduction in the amount of PM2.5 at the monitoring station in GOR. Now, we've spoken before about whether or not that monitoring station is in a peak site. And at this very moment, we have a network of sensors, like we did Clarity around Invercargill. We did the low-cost sensors around Invercargill last year. We have now got that in GOR. So this year, we will have data for that in GOR. So there's 50 sensors around GOR. That will tell us the spatial distribution of pollutants, including PM2.5 in GOR. So that's what I've got to say for the PM2.5 at the moment. I'm going to move now on to the nitrogen dioxide data, which I know everyone's very keen on. So this actually came up from November 2023 to January 24. So there's 3 months worth of nitrogen dioxide data across 40 different locations in Invercargill. The reason why we did this is because if you remember back to the Health and Air Pollution in New Zealand study, which came out in 2021, it showed bad negative consequences for the health impacts, a surprising negative consequence for health impacts for residents of Invercargill in particular. And it was, I think it raised eyebrows both here and nationally that this was such a consequence, considering nitrogen dioxide, which was the key component of the findings, was significantly, the impacts of nitrogen dioxide was significantly higher than expected. So what they wanted to do, well, first of all, I should explain that the Happens 3 model was based on 2 data points. So basically there's 2 monitors. There's one on Highway 1 and then one in the background. They based the whole modelling across the whole of Invercargill based on 2 data points and then set those 2 data points against similar sorts of towns where they had more data. So what they wanted to do is calibrate their model. So NZTA and NIWA got together and they ran this project for us for 3 months, just to see whether or not the data was comparable, the real data was comparable to the model data. They chose, for some reason, summer to do this. I don't know why. This report is not yet published. I've got permission from Waka Kotahi to present on this, knowing that it will go public, but they haven't yet presented the report. So I haven't seen all the absolute findings, but they've given me this information to present to you today. What the plot on the right-hand side shows, I'll explain this. This is sensor area unit, which is the CAU. So this is the mean concentration over the 3-month period with the concentrations rising. So the project that we've done this year, so the actual real-time data is on the y-axis going upwards, and you've got the sensor unit and the model data on the x-axis going that way. The dashed line in the middle, if every data point matched what the model said, it would match that, it would go directly up the dashed line straight through the middle. The dotted line is the real data that we have. And you can see that actually it's not bad. The model data performed fairly well. Interestingly, where they expected the concentrations to be lowest, i.e. the background site, say if you're in a cul-de-sac away from a major road or a major source, those concentrations were higher than the model predicted. Whereas when you're on a major intersection, well, I don't want to spoil that for the next one, but where you would expect the concentrations to be highest, they weren't quite as high as expected. The peaks weren't as high peaks, but the lows weren't quite as low. So you get this flatter line. Now, the obvious reason for this, and it's not explained in the report, but I assume it is because we're a coastal city, we've got high dilution and dispersion rates. So it doesn't have time to pool. If you've got the nitrogen dioxide source, it plumes up there and then instantly spreads out. So it'll spread to areas that other than other towns because it's higher and there's less dilution. It doesn't get there, but it means that on those sites, you don't get those high peaks. And that's simply because of the topography, where we are, as well as the low-rise structure of the Invercargill. So this is actually the plot. So this is actually the new data based on the plot, the one on the right-hand side. So that's actually the model data with the actual data, the actual concentrations in the box. So you can see there's nothing really above 10 or between 10 and 15 micrograms over the entire area. But it shows the hotspot areas. And if you know you're in Invercargill, you know that these hotspots, the lighter coloured green, are where the traffic lights are. Yeah? They're at intersections. And that is shown by these box plots and whiskers. So just to confirm, I noticed that they didn't put a key on here, is that the box plots are the 25th to the 75th percentile of the data set, and the whiskers are the 95th and 5th. So they're kind of like the peak and the lowest concentrations. And so your urban background is lower, is your lowest, as well as your roadside, which is kind of weird because your roadside is where the source comes from. Knowing that nitrogen dioxide almost all comes from motor vehicles. There's very few other sources. It's all combustion processes, and by and large, it comes from a motor vehicle. Usually diesel vehicles, but welding, if you're doing some welding and stuff like that, you can create quite a lot of nitrogen dioxide as well. It's superheating the air. So you can see that urban background site, roadside, and then industrial. I don't know where they've located those industrial, but those three sites are all generally within that 10 microgram. Remember the WHO value of 10 microgram. So they're all generally within that sort of value. Whereas your canyon, which we don't have many of because we're not a very high-rise sort of town. So I assume that's when we go towards the city centre area, and they are slightly higher buildings, as well as intersections. And you can see that on the plot on the right-hand side. So if you're at an intersection where the traffic light is, so you've got cars stopping and starting, and it's when cars have to get going and trucks have to go and your ute has to go, that's when you release a plume, that's when you're actually creating your nitrogen dioxide. I live on the corner of Linda's Farm Road and Yarrow Street, and they're just putting in traffic lights right outside my house, and I'm delighted about that because that's going to raise my concentration. So I'm going to put a sensor right outside, and I'm going to do my own experiment in my own house because it'll be very interesting. Okay, so I can just conclude now. So going back to PM2.5, decreasing trends in PM2.5 concentrations, evident in both Invercargill and Gore in 2019. However, should we implement a 25 microgram per cubic meter regulatory standard as is proposed, then we would exceed that on both sites. If we went even stringenter and went to the WHO guideline, we would struggle to make that for a few years. That would take further emission reductions to actually get there. But we're not alone in that. Pretty much everyone would have that scenario in every town. Nitrogen dioxide concentrations are actually similar to those modelled by Happens 3. As yet, I'm not aware that they're going to repeat the Happens project at the moment. Preempting the question, I've asked the question of both NIWA and Gerda, who actually was the head of this project, who I know. But there isn't any central government instinct to actually do so at the moment. However, that doesn't mean that we can't get them to rerun the data through for this going forward. The levels of concentrations are not that high. I mean, I'm from Auckland and we'll easily break 40 micrograms on Queen Street. So the concentrations here are 10 to 15, so we're much lower than a bigger town, of course. But because it's quite spread out and because we have quite a vulnerable population, as Bobby mentioned, poor housing stock, etc., then there are consequences and there can be acute and chronic health issues for those, and they can be exacerbated because of those knock-on issues. And thank you very much.
I have to say, while I was reading through the papers, I was sure that my science and maths teachers would have been really proud of my applying my brain to such a technical report. I think I understood it. Yes, indeed. And most of them I still see, so they'll remind me. So we had Councillor Rodway, do you have a question, please?
Well,
No?
yes, then.
Yep, and then leave your hands up, folks, while I catch up. And then Robert after the
Thank
next.
you very much. Nicholas, those graphs are a little bit challenging. What can we do and what do we need to do to get these nitrogen dioxide and these fine particles to a level where they're not a health risk to our community?
To the chair. It's a tough one because obviously to remove the concentrations or to reduce the concentrations, you have to reduce the emissions and the emission sources. They're not the same emission sources and they both create their own challenges. For NO2 emissions, the WHO actually stages its planned reduction, and this is based on both can be on technological improvements. So first of all, electrifying the fleet directly cuts nitrogen dioxide. So the only way that nitrogen dioxide is created is through the combustion engine, more or less. But that is exactly where people are. Electrifying the buses in Auckland had a good effect on reducing nitrogen dioxide, for example. And so those kind of processes going forward will actually reduce NO2 going forward. So as electrification of fleet does happen, then we will actually reduce nitrogen dioxide. Obviously, the other thing, as you showed, is intersections. So you can urban design your way into better outcomes for nitrogen dioxide, I would say, by having roundabouts instead of traffic lights. A very good way of not having trucks to stop and start, for example, and things like this. So there is ways that's going through nitrogen dioxide. The strategy for reducing particulates, because most of it comes from wood burning in winter, is replacing out the boilers and the burners, I think. This is the best way and something we are doing at the moment, because the new burners, even if they're not the ultra-low fuel burners, they're still far better than the old burners. They burn a lot cleaner, they burn a lot warmer. But there is the healthy homes aspect as well, and that should also be considered. If you have well-insulated home, you don't have to burn as much, so therefore you reduce the emissions from each house. But it's on a section-by-section basis that you should do it, so area by area. As I presented last year, South Invercargill has worse outcomes and it also has higher concentrations, which isn't always down to them, it's due to airflow. They also are potentially different. They have a different way to be reached. Let's put it that way. We don't always communicate well to them. So we are working now, and I say we, Tanya McCann and also the strategy team. We've reached out to South Alive and other advocacy groups down there, and we've started working with them and the local residents to try and get the messages across on this. So it's trying to get them to work, not just on reducing smoke, but that is reducing their cold, increasing their warmth within their homes and things like this. So looking at it from a big picture, and I think that's the way to approach it.
Thank you.
Sorry, that's so.
Councillor Dyson.
Thank you. My question was going to be about electric vehicles, but you've addressed that. And the second part was, are those people who make the decisions about the placement of traffic lights cognizant of your work or this information about NO2, and should they be, and would they take it into account?
Mr. Invercargill City Council got in touch with me about the presentation quite recently, and he said, "Can we talk about it?" So, I don't know exactly who has the ultimate say on these kind of structures and this kind of urban design infrastructure, but the information is quite new here. Down here, it's like even in Auckland, it's very hard pushed to get everyone to work together. They work generally in silos, and they have different outcomes. They have different requirements for them. So let's put it that way. So one of the really good things you can do with air quality, of course, it's a really good indicator for how well your city is designed. Yeah, if you've got a well-designed city, then everything flows. You don't get the build-up of pollutants. You don't get those kind of things. So it's a really good indicator. And I'm trying to put using small sensors around the area can be a really good way to see how effective a certain change within your infrastructure has actually been. So you can have a before and after, and you can actually use it as a really good gauge. And that's something I've always been very keen on people to do going forward.
Thank you.
Chair, just to add to that, we have a group of second tier managers from across all the councils in Te Ao Marama, and actually Great South periodically attends as well, which meets regularly, and we raised this report at the last of those meetings and have actually decided as an action that the science team from Environment Southland will come periodically and provide updates so that we do get information to all the places it needs to go to.
Right, thanks. Councillor Evans and then Chairman Horrell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just looking at page 11, where it's sort of got the graph starting from 2019 through to now, and if you look at 2019, there's a huge, massive issue there. First question would be, what would be the cause of that? Second question would be, should we start looking at the information after that? Because there's obviously something happened when the information's been collected. But I've also noticed, if we looked at those yearly spikes in a monthly situation, around May, everything seems to drop off. Like we don't seem to have, you would expect that's where we're heading into a winter and the graph drops. If you took that graph and removed the 2019, which is a real huge, massive spike, then the figures would look like we are gently coming right. Yeah.
To the chair, sorry. These plots are deseasonalized, so don't take the points literally. What it is spread out over the period, and the way that they actually work it out is just to make sure, to try and get it a more nuance, so the whole graph is smoothed across the area, and that's the way that we can actually do the trend analysis. And it's just a part of the software where actually you can seasonalize, i.e. you can look at each season independently, or deseasonalize, so you look at the whole year as a whole. And I chose deseasonalize. It seems to be it's a rule of thumb when doing air quality, is that we'll deseasonalize it. But still, you are right. In 2019, on both plots, on both areas, there are high concentrations. And I did look at this because I wondered whether or not it's a bedding in period for the instrument. But if you don't have a reason to take out data, you don't take out data. It's like, you can't just say, well, that's weird data, get rid of it. It's like, so I had no reason to get rid of it. And because it's a period of both Invercargill and Gore, it seems like maybe 2019 winter was a particularly cold or a particularly still winter, where it did allow for building to a certain degree. And since then, we just haven't had a winter like that. So concentrations are low. We are at the behest of meteorology with air quality. So if you get a really cold, still winter, you will still get a spike in concentrations. Just hope that spike is less than.
So getting back to that, instead of removing that information, maybe it's a good idea to encapsulate that information for the next time something like that may happen. Like if you're going to equate it to a still air season or a very cold season, encapsulate that 2019 information just in case it reoccurs again.
It will show back up, and it will be interesting to see. So yeah. Cool. But we're already at the beginning of our PM 2.5 monitoring, so yeah. So thank you.
Chairman Horrell.
Yes, thanks for that. And it appears that after having to go on television because Invercargill was supposed to be the most dangerous place in the world to live, that the data was showing that's not quite the case. Also interesting, we always thought that 24-hour 2.5 would be a lot harder to actually achieve with the site. But it might be steep, but the gradient does look to be heading in the right direction. But the other thing I picked up on was the cul-de-sac still having higher than concentrations than actually eroding. And I've raised it before. I wonder if we should go back to the territorials and suggest they have a bylaw to replace inefficient burners at the point of sale. Well, it's not a total answer. I still think we would make some progress. It's reasonably painless at the point of sale to actually get more efficient heating into houses.
Thanks, Chairman. Councillor McPhail, then Councillor McDonald, and then Councillor Roy.
I was thinking, starts thinking about vineyards and putting big fans in and big fans just keep the air flowing and we'll be all good as gold. But running them on diesel, or on fire. I see. It's just obviously the lockdowns in 2020. They seem to be higher did that have an influence when people were staying at home and saying, instead of being out working, that they're saying, hey, we need to be warm at home with the fire on? Has that been, like, it's great, like it's going trends, we're all talking about trends, I think that's the most positive thing. But was there a natural ability that people being locked inside, so to speak?
I actually did a national study. I worked for MFE and I produced a report to actually look exactly at this across every town in New Zealand. I worked with Stats and MFE, and there was a published report on the MFE website that actually that I led. And yes, exactly. So what actually happened is the lockdown started in summer, but what we actually saw is a movement up the country where PM 2.5 increased during each lockdown. Earlier than would normally be the case. So what actually happened is people were lighting their fires earlier and for longer, and it's because they were at home more. So what they did is displace where they would use their energy towards the town centre or in transport, they used it in wood burning. So whereas NO2 dropped, PM 2.5 actually increased over some periods. So exactly, it did happen.
So technically that year is a bit of a one-off, did change the data a wee bit, yeah.
It was a great experiment as far as air quality is concerned, so yes.
On lots of fronts.
Thanks, interesting question, thanks. Councillor McDonald and then Councillor Roy.
Thank you. I'm just interested in slide number 7, where it shows our 2 arterial routes from most of our commercial traffic going right down the length of our city, and the city is shaped as such. Is that those routes are quite long, aren't they, all the way down? So, we've talked about a ring road, we've talked about bypasses before. I'm just really interested when and this is probably just a wee bit of a challenge to this council, is when you start to collect information and you find out things, you can't unknow them. And as the links to human health become very strong, I'm wondering what risk liability there will be to local government in the south. So just a wee bit of a warning that we will have to take action as those links become even more stronger and more information expected. Now, I know that's not a question that if you want to comment, you're most welcome to.
To the chair, I do have a very short comment. 2 things you can do: make one-way systems in and out, which other towns are doing, and the second one is to plant trees, because they act as natural buffers. Plants, hedgerows and trees actually act as natural buffers between roadways and pedestrian ways and houses. So the 2 things you can actually do to stop the pollutions from your road getting to people and houses stuff is to actually create natural barriers. Good suggestion.
Great. Yeah.
Speaks to the spatial planning conversation significantly, actually. Thank you, Councillor Roy.
Well, thank you. It's my understanding that nitrogen dioxide is listed as a greenhouse gas. So have we factored in
Nitrous oxide.
nitrous oxide? Sorry. Yeah. So nitrogen dioxide is listed as well, isn't it?
I don't think it's that significant.
It's coming from the same entity. If you're burning fossil fuels, you're creating nitrogen dioxide to the chest, sorry, and also you are creating a greenhouse gas as an emission as well. Whether or not it's the exact same thing, it's not quite the same thing, but you are creating, if you are creating nitrogen dioxide, you are creating a greenhouse gas as well.
Yeah. So, my question's been a bit dilated, but so does it factor in at all in our profile for greenhouse gases?
Well, emissions at ground level is an air pollution issue. As soon as it goes above ground level, it's then a climate issue.
Yeah.
So emissions are emissions, but it's not a health impact. If it's above ground level, it becomes a climate issue, and that's when you have to consider it as a climate factor. But transport obviously is a key contributor to climate emissions here, so it is a key concern.
So last question from Councillor Rodway, thanks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, the questions come from comments from Nicole and Peter about what we need to do about this. And now that we've got a lot of good data, know it'll be collected, more will be collected. But the air plan, which I was on the panel of a long time ago now, I'm not sure, can't remember exactly when it was, but it must be nearly time for a review of the air plan, maybe only a year or 2 away. And I'd imagine that this information will be able to be used for that, and we will be able to address these issues. My understanding is in the existing air plan that coal burning appliances in Howes were to be phased out, and they have been reduced in use, but I don't know how much they have been, and I can't remember exactly what the rules were to phase them out. So my question is, can this information be used? When will it be able to be used? When does our air plan need to be revised?
To the chair, the air plan came out in 2016, 10-year, and so strategy people. It came out in 2016, but was developed obviously a couple of years. It took a couple of years. I believe this is before my time, so this is something I've only looked over, of course, and discussed with staff members who are still here. This data, to your question, these data can most certainly be used, and I do discuss it in these terms all the time, because these pieces of information are not done just one at a time. They're actually done as part of a strategy going forward, which is directed from the science team. We are actually looking at ways to build a whole picture of how to best approach it. But what we first of all is need to know the evidence to see where we can best make the key gains. So we know from the work last year, the spatial dynamics of where the pollution are. We know how many times the PM2.5 we've gone. We've done the PM10 data as well. Now we've got the nitrogen dioxide data across Invercargill, and we're moving to Gora as well. So we're starting to look at our airsheds. We're starting to build a picture. Using all that data, then we can start to then see how the new air plan should take shape, both to address these issues and to go forward for the best results, I think.
Rachel, did you want to
Just
comment?
comment there, through you, Chair, at the next Strategy and Policy Committee meeting, we intend to do an update on the broader portfolio. So that includes all the activity following on from this report, which is the science and the information. So where is everything, including the Clean Air Loan Scheme, the plan, the communications and engagement, all of that info as an update to the next Strat and Pol.
Thanks, Rachel. Councillor Evans, you're looking at me. Do you have a question that is brief?
Yes, just one brief question
May I have a
regarding
brief question?
regarding what Chairman Hurrell said regarding selling appliances for people. My understanding is in Tiana we can still put in multi-fuel fires. The determination of the multi-fuel needs to be sorted, what that is, whether it's coal, wood, kerosene and whatever. But we can still put multi-fuels in. And of course the quality of coal is not the same as what it was. So maybe that's part of our issue, what Morris was saying. The Clean Air Group, the District Council need to work on making sure that we get the right fires in new builds in the right place.
To the chair, yes, it's a matter of designated air sheds for management of those factors, but I mean, there's no reason to better manage what projects are out there. I'll leave it there.
At the risk of breaking my own rules, who decides, who designates an air shed? And what's, I mean, should there be one? And
that's a very good question. I'm not actually certain. I'm not actually sure how that process actually goes through, but I assume it's through the actual plan itself would actually work, and it would be a strategy decision about
right. Yeah, through you, Chair, just to be
process.
Just to be clear, yeah, it's set by the air plan itself.
Yeah,
and it
yeah.
connects up to the regional policy statement as well. So, and there's a regulatory frame there.
Yes.
So when we're looking at the air plan review, that would be items for discussion.
Just one last thing, just to cover that, is that we monitored in Tiana last year. We actually put some sensors up there, and we found that concentrations were well under for the PM10. They were well under what we would regulate, but sometimes there were peaks in concentrations, which meant that we would go back and monitor again quite soon, just to keep an eye on it to make sure that it is staying within regulatory standards.
thanks, Nick.
Happy to move the recommendation, Madam Chair.
There's two recommendations there to receive both reports. Thanks. So that's Chairman Horrell and Councillor Cook. Any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Yes. Thanks, Nick. Really interesting. Thanks very much. Item 9.3, the water and land portfolio update. Welcome, Liz.
We take this report as read, however, just to give you an update, the proposed water and land plan, where there are still appeals outstanding on that plan, we are progressing on some. So we've got one in High Court on drainage maintenance. We've sought an adjournment on that one so that we can deal with that hopefully outside the court process. There's a High Court decision on Rule 24, which is the discharge provision. There's a lot of considerations going on at the moment in how we respond to that that you might get to talk about later on. And then there's also some water quantity issues that are being dealt with as well. However, the majority of the proposed plan we are hoping to progress through to later on this afternoon on to make provisions operative. And then as part of that, there's the implementation work that needs to go alongside it. So people are aware of what's in the proposed plan and what's operative and how that might affect them. That piece of work is ongoing. Just to make you aware, the proposed plan does include farm environmental management plans, and so we are working on the rollout of how that will work in Southland, given we've also got the regulations sitting beside it and uncertainties around what regulations, where they're going to go in the future. However, we are still working to implement farm environmental management plans in Southland. There's been some certification training. We had about 21 people through that training session so far, and there's some more coming up in June. So no one's yet been appointed, but they've gone through the process, which is exciting. Plan change Tuatahi, we are still working on the scope of that to bring to you to confirm what it actually is going to look like. The proposal is still to go towards a Southland-based approach to our water quality issues and quality issues in light of the objectives on the proposed plan. Whether we go down the full regulatory approach of the national policy statement type approach or embed it within a whole realm of other work programs to get us in the direction of those objectives. That piece of work is being developed and we will get it to you, hopefully, in the next month. The other two parts of this report, I've got Fiona here to as well. We thought we should actually include something that's not just policy related in the water and land portfolio, so that you are aware that there's a lot of work going on that does relate to water in our organisations. There's a couple of catchment plan pieces of work that you might want to give you an update on how those are progressing, and also some work program underway for intensive winter grazing.
Fiona, do you want to come and chair if there's one lurking? Thank you.
Thanks, Liz. Thank you, through you, Chair. So we've just updated on, councillors will be aware, we've been working in the Waikawa on an integrated catchment management plan, and we're very much in the early stages now of the Waihopai catchment plan. So I guess the key link here is ensuring that we are connected up in terms of the work going on in policy frameworks that are needed to help us in the governance space and the direction. And obviously there's work around action plans happening in the policy space, and I guess the approach of those action plans needs to align very closely with the work coming through the community conversations in terms of catchment planning. So happy to answer questions. As I say, we are in the early stages of the Waihopai project. So more to come in that space. In terms of intensive winter grazing, really the focus again, there's a strong regulatory framework to intensive winter grazing. We know of in recent weeks there's been some changes proposed around that, but really our focus needs to be on ensuring that the environmental outcomes we're all looking for in terms of winter grazing remain the focus both of staff working with farmers, but also farmers making choices particularly as we lead into stock moving now onto crop. So our focus is just making sure we're really reinforcing within the regulatory framework, but reinforcing the good management practices, all the practices that we know make a difference in terms of environmental outcomes, and just ensuring, I know there are stock on crop now. The official season started on the 1st of May, but the bulk of people are still to move their animals to crop. And we want to make sure those paddocks are well set up, so that we've got, stock not in critical source areas. We've got the right buffers in place to ensure that we don't get those adverse effects. Thank you.
Thanks, Fiona. I hear councillor McDonald and then councillor Pemberton, and then councillor Morrison, councillor Warwick, and councillor McDonald. Thanks, Peter.
Just a couple of questions. One to do around Lisbon and change to the day. Just some of the way that's worded, I could read that and say that I'm not too sure around the direction that was given. Like, I take it that discussion's yet to happen, but I understand that there has to be some work that has to come to us. So my concern is we get too far ahead of us. So we were promised a discussion around that topic once the LCT work was finished from a chief executive. So I assume we're still going to have a high level discussion on that. So just reading that, it sounds as though that's already happened, but I could be reading that wrong. So I just need to be a bit of clarity on that. The second question is
so through you, Chair, just very quickly, the wording reflects the Stratham policy meeting notes from February, and we talked about it at the last Stratham policy meeting as well. The intention is still that we'll be progressing some form of change. What that looks like will be dependent on the conversations we have this afternoon in terms of the proposed plan. So what the team have been working on the last few weeks is what a change will look like, and what that's going to look like needs to come back to yourselves before we go any further. So we haven't been making any decisions, we're just framing up what that might look like in light of where the proposed plan has got to, and also where we might want to be going next with a future plan change.
The second question is just around intensive winter grazing. Why aren't we coming out and talking about it? It seems as though Federated Farmers is making comments on it, supporting the improvements that we've made. They're quite high profile about it. It's been in the media recently. Aren't we talking about, especially when those national provisions were dropped? Why didn't we have any communications then, just to reaffirm the improvements, to keep people thinking? I don't know, it's just a question.
Oh, no, perhaps I'll defer to Lucy, you might like to respond to that one.
Yeah, I jump in, sorry to jump in again, but through you, Chair. Just, I think again, connecting to the proposed plan decision this afternoon, our rules are different than what exists at a national level, and messaging following this afternoon's conversations will need to go out about what our rules are. So I think that's intimately connected to your question. Our intensive winter grading rules are different. We need to be really clear about what those differences are. I saw the article you were referring to. I think that's helpful.
Well, good, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Pemberton.
Yeah, just revolving around catchment planning. Waikawa, have we taken any? We're going to change our approach around anything there. Just some feedback from the community was they were brought in halfway through. So yeah, just making sure we're getting the right engagement.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we've noticed about the process is actually, firstly, the early engagement is really critical, especially and actually what's perhaps more important in feedback we've had, because we've had one meeting, I think a couple of weeks ago with the community, is that sense that this is actually an ongoing piece of work that will actually grow and keep developing in time, and that there's continuing involvement and engagement and ability to update and keep refreshing the information. So the way in which this proceeds into the future will reflect that. We are out meeting with the community on Monday morning next week, so there's some representatives in particular who've said, we're really keen to have more conversation, and so we're absolutely attending to that. The key thing we don't want to do in Waikawa, and we haven't had any sort of sense of a desire for this either from people involved, either agencies or community, is create great big structures that are time consuming. We want to actually be moving through the information gathering stage, which will continue, but then actually moving to actions, doing things on the ground, and that's where our focus will turn to in the coming months.
Yeah, just probably really important to engage with people that live there rather than all the other agencies that have interest. interest, would be my advice.
So just for councillors to our knowledge, we had 3 or 4 public meetings out there, as well as a number of sort of community involvement days, as well as also a number of site visits to various properties in the catchment. So, but we can come back and
Thanks, Fiona. Councillor Morrison.
A couple of questions, thank you. One was on the ICP projects. To me, they seem like a wonderful opportunity to learn toys, as an example. Have we got a mechanism to sort of capture the lessons and insights? Because I would imagine in time they will inform a wider approach to integrated catchment.
So in brief, through you, Chair, yes, actually we had an internal sort of team, internal team briefing yesterday on it, and it's very evident in some of the things that we've learned through the Waikawa project we will take into the Waihopai. Now, the Waihopai, and so the challenge is that every catchment is a little bit different. So, but what I think we will find is that there are similar phases that we need to go through, and that engagement phase, which is really important, as I say, both in terms of the local people on the ground, but also the agencies in Mana Whenua, has, we've done some really good learning in this space, so we'll report on that.
Thank you. Yeah, the couple of points. One was on the calendar of actions in respect of the intensive winter grazing. Is it possible to have visibility of what that calendar is, the level of detail and the key movements that are planned as part of that would be. And the final one was on plan change to Tuatahi, the revised scope. It would be good if at the time that is shared with us to review the revised scope. If the previous or existing scope was available to compare and contrast what was initially planned or what's different in the revised scope, that would be most helpful if that's possible.
I would assume. Thank you. Councillor McPhail, you're next.
Yes, got a number of things, but just in regards to winter grazing, I did have a conversation at the local, the Feds AGM meeting last week, and from industry groups that they had noticed, and this was the scary, that some people believe the rules had gone in regards to winter grazing are going back around buffer zones. I said, we need to really reiterate there are rules still, even in our own waterland plan. And these are good management practices that should be getting implemented. And I think we need to put a warning out to certain individuals if they think that's where we're heading. And because at the end of the day, Feds, other groups have said they will not stand beside anybody not doing good management practices. And I think that it's really important the public need to know that we have law, we can, no matter what, even the water land plan, we can prosecute with just discharge water. So we've shown that, so, because it's letting everyone down. If they think these are gone and we'll just go back to what we've done in the past, it's not good. I just wanted to make that in the public arena, and we need to really engage with the industries and really focus on that. So nobody's going to stand beside them. If they do, if their reason is the rules are gone, that's not on. I was just going to ask a question. Does the public understand have we sort of indicated, obviously it's going through a High Court Rule 24, Section 70 debacle, as far as I call it, in regards to how that affects farming? Does the public actually, I know it's in the public arena, but actually, we're discussing it here, obviously, that how that can, the interpretation, how that plays out, basically, we've said that it almost bans farming with those linking. So just to understand what we're dealing with in legal channels, that's what I'm just asking. Can you actually sort of, I know you don't want to put the boot in, but really, this is absolutely ludicrous how these things interact and how the High Court's making calls and judges just asking, throwing it out there.
Through you, Chair. So the level at which people understand the decision is, I don't know. I would imagine it's pretty low levels of understanding, given it's complicated and technical in terms of the RMA sections that it relates to. We're not the only ones who are grappling with this particular issue though. Environment Canterbury had a similar decision come at a similar time to ours, which connects to another section in the RMA. The lawyers happen to be our lawyers and ECAN's lawyers, so they briefed the policy managers group earlier this week about some proposed moves forward from here. We have an item on the extraordinary council meeting this afternoon to discuss where we as a council are recommending you take the next steps in regards to the Rule 24 elements. So we will need to be discussing it more, but at the moment it is a decision of the High Court, and so we are in the hands of that court. They've made their call, and now we need to just talk through where to next with that. So that's a matter that we have got tabled for later on today, but we can talk more about it there if that's.
It'll work.
Happy to
Thank you,
talk as
Councillor.
part of that about the messaging though as well.
Yes, messaging will be important.
Just in regards, obviously, when we adopt our plan around the certification and that, we developing what certification means. I know I've talked with Fiona a little bit yesterday about this. I said, I just want to make sure that as a council, we're given a heads up as you're working through this. Certainly, there's interpretations of we've got the government mandated certification. How are we looking at certification? What does that mean for Southland when we're developing these farm plans? Because I believe and I feel that it should be different personally. But we want to have that discussion.
So currently, our plan refers to the regulations, and so certification is dealt with through the regulation space. However, our plan has a slightly different approach, especially suitably qualified. So it's slightly different, but at the moment, the regs are there, and that is what we like, what certifies.
If I can just comment too, obviously we're looking at the implementation, and it's a very much a live discussion in terms of the interaction between what's happening nationally and how we're going to implement our own requirements, including reference to suitably qualified people in the auditing process. So I think that's something that we'd like to probably come back to council on. In terms of the workshops that Liz mentioned that have been happening, these I think have been seen by everyone who's attended as being enormously helpful, because they actually look in a really operational, practical way at what does Hawara mean, what is the direction of the plan, how do you look at farm plans with that lens actually in the farming setting. So irrespective of what happens, I think there's been a really important learning opportunity that's been created by them.
Is that feedback going to get back to us as in we're not in those workshops, I take it, as governors?
Compiled.
That's what I'm asking.
Thank you. Councillor Rodway.
Oh, thank you. Yes, two things, Madam Chair. First, relating to the Waikawa catchment, I'm very pleased to see this. The Waikawa catchment, many people may not know too much about it. It's a wonderful stream. It's quite a small stream. It's got a lot of natural character in it, particularly the lower reaches. There are on the banks of the Waihapa stream, there are very large lowland ribbonwoods and kowhai trees, probably the best example of them in Southland. There are a few other places like the Winton Channel and stuff, but are really a catchment with a very high lot of natural character. So it's really important that this is recognised and protected. The lower reaches have a series of little waterfalls, which are quite good for kayaking if you're a bit of you don't have to be too expert. But also, and probably more importantly, the lower reaches, the lowest fall is called the Niagara Falls, and that is a very important kana collecting, harvesting site. So I'm very pleased to see this happening, and I hope that it will lead on to recognise things and develop and protect these things. The second thing is a bit more of a negative, and I'm sorry, Jeremy, this may raise your blood pressure a bit, but
That's why this is the last question for this section.
With grazing, the word there about supporting good outcomes for intensive winter grazing. There are no good outcomes for intensive winter grazing from an environmental point of view. From an economic point of view, surely, yes, that's right. I'd rather that the words be added after support, take out the word good and put in good management practices rather than good outcomes. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Sorry, Chairman Horrell, if I missed you off my list. You may contribute now.
Thank you, Chair. Just,
Oh, sorry, Alistair.
Two comments now. Peter mentioned public grazing. I did do an interview on national radio a couple of weeks ago. Tony McCain was on Hokanui, I think, yesterday. So we are putting that message out there that there are rules, and if the national ones go, and that's the thing, we're still waiting for certainty on what the government's actually doing, because we've said right from the start, have plans for the dovetail. So that's probably why there's a wee bit of a delay in the next plate over plan change to a tahi. Once we've got that settled, it should be reasonably shortly that will help. Yeah, so what was I going to say? There was something else there. But certainly with the intensive winter grazing, we have made huge progress, and we will still be out there, and we'll be looking. And we are already seeing good behaviour, but we also, if people have bad behaviour, it'll be seen. I mean, last year, probably the first time, the activists had to go to Otago to find the sort of things they wanted. So that shows us how far we've actually come in that area.
Thanks, Chairman. Councillor Gibson, apologies if I missed you earlier.
Don't worry, I'm
You need to
small.
let your hand up longer when there's lots of people, or I can't see.
Our messaging as an outfit is poor, extremely poor. Now, and I think that we need, if we're going to go through our land and water plan, and we've got the difficulties that are happening that Nichols just talked about, that the government has changed things, we've got to differentiate ourselves and make sure that's out there. Not two interviews over the radio. We've got to saturate the whole province on what's going on, because we're coming from behind with communication. We've got to get that right this time. Yeah. The other thing, Liz, you hate me, I know. Tell me, with these plans and these certifiers that you've got lined up, is that a hangover from what the government funded, or have we started to put money in? The training of these certifiers, you said 21.
Yeah. So Lucy might.
Only if this.
If that helps.
Come again? I'm having
The
trouble.
word certifier is in our plan. We're going to ratify this afternoon. How that looks is something we'll work out, but actually it's in the plan at the moment.
Yeah, but Liz said.
I can comment through you, Chair, if that's helpful.
Yep,
So
thanks.
I think the information you're looking for is that the cost of for the people that have attended the workshops recently, part A is yes, it is from the hangover from the last government process, if you like, but that is money that they've already paid into the assured quality process to become certifiers. So that is funding that we've received from assured quality. Now, clearly, there may well be changes into the future in terms of the assured quality system in totality and the certification system and the funding side of it, but that is money that they have already paid into the system to be able to be certifiers. And that workshop is something that has been, various regions are doing it or have been doing it. The workshop purpose, as I said earlier, among other things, is to really anchor our certifiers, should they still be certifiers in the future, around understanding the Southland setting and the proposed Southland Water and Land Plan direction.
Here's my concern, is do we have that allowed for in our budgets?
So
If it becomes our problem.
that's what we would need to look at. Yes, exactly. And again, that's part of, as everyone sort of mentioned, there's changes happening in terms of some of the national approach to the systems, but notwithstanding that, we absolutely still have to be focused on how we're going to deliver that as a region from a Southland perspective and from a Southland direction of travel. Yes, thank you.
Councillor,
I'm sorry, but I must respond to Councillor Gibson's comment about poor publicity. I don't agree with that at all. I think that's incorrect. I think we have a very, very good public relations department section, and there's a lot of information out there about all the things that we do and that we're responsible for. So I'm sorry, Alistair, but I don't agree with
I'm
that.
allowed to respond to you though, aren't I? Well, I'm going to.
Councillor.
Go for it.
Councillors. Thank you. Councillor Gibson, I will let you respond, but
well,
be mindful, please.
It's like this. I turned up to our drop-in workshops? On 2 occasions, nobody knew. Now, it wasn't until after that that probably I started complaining and others started complaining, our assistant chairman down there, that this wasn't right, that we got some publicity going and got people, we didn't actually get people coming, but at least they were aware of it. We did radio broadcasts. They got out, and I don't know whether they didn't put flyers around, but things got moving after it started. We wasted probably a day because we didn't have people turning up. So, Morris, I think you want to come with us sometimes.
Thank you, councillor. I'm just going to close the conversation off by saying that we all appreciate that the getting our many messages out is a very complex process, actually, as much as we'd like it to be simple. There are many channels and there are many ways for people to take on information, and I would support any efforts that the comms team are making. But I would also add, actually, that the constituents who are particularly interested usually make their own efforts to find information, and so there's a certain amount of personal responsibility required, I believe, to seek information if it's something that you're particularly interested in. So, no.
No, I
I'll
can't.
move the recommendation.
Okay. I just want to say, this is not a discussion around inadequate comms. This is about an investment early on that will set us in really good stead when it comes to the darkest winter months.
That's right.
So that's what it's about. It's not
That's
about
right.
poor communication.
So we need to choose our words carefully then, councillor.
I'll second that.
So we have a, thank you. Anne, did you have a question or?
A tiny little comment. Yeah, I read.
Because you have not spoken before, I will allow it. Thank you.
A tiny little comment about personal responsibility, etc., and social media. I read, did I not, Dairy NZ misrepresenting velvet leaf being found in Southland again. And our approach was very gentle from Environment Southland, I believe, because we're aware so many of our communities and constituents are involved there. And it's a hard road, the social media, radio, etc.
Thanks, Anne. We've had a mover, councillor Roy, I believe, and seconded by councillor Cook. Are there any, is there any further discussion?
I'd like to make one quick comment, not about the thing, but when we get told that winter grazing is not a good environmental, understand the whole farming situation, what farmers, 95% of the farm has been protected environmentally because of that. We're dealing with winter grazing, the rules, and we're making huge gains and improvement. It's not going to be perfect, but there's a lot going on there, Morris. So I just want to put it on the other side. I know we must have got out of the bed on the wrong side this morning, but I just want to say there's a balance to this discussion. So
Thank you, and that is why I've allowed some of the extra comments, because it's important that people have a say, but we have a motion on the table, so I would like to move that motion. Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. 9.4. Liz, if you're willing, could you please stay? And Marcus is joining you for backup.
the rest of the farm,
Just be aware that we're not really pushed for time, but we do need to keep moving. So thanks, Liz. Take it away.
I'll let Marcus take this one.
Thank you.
Marcus, why don't you take this one?
Marcus, take it away.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So yeah, in terms of the legislative reform fast track bill submission's been in, I'll just turn you over to page 20 of the report. There's a diagram here that's been provided by the Ministry for the Environment that sort of shows the phasing of next components of the reform strategy. So just probably worthwhile talking through a few of those points and answering any questions as they crop up. So effectively, the National Built Environment Act Special Planning Act's been repealed into phase 2. There's 2 bills proposed as part of that reform project. First bill's coming mid to end of May, looking at the MPSFM, Te Mano Te Waiharaki, stock exclusion regulations, intensive winter grazing and alignment, consenting pathway for coal mining as part of that, and finally the National Policy Statement for Indigenous Biodiversity. We'll work through the process. It was also talked about aquaculture, extending the timeframes for the adding additional 25 years for aquaculture as part of that process too. So we'll see how that pops out once that final bill is drafted and pops out for consultation. The second bill is slower, that'll be there towards the end of the year, so there's still a wee bit of trying to figure out exactly what goes into that bill. And then the final stage is, I guess, looking at the wider national or integrated national direction is phase 2. Phase 3 is the replacement of the RMA. So that's the broad context of where things are headed. We have heard that there was a conversation around extending the consenting for ports, which I've noted on the bottom of page 20 and start of page 21. It's unclear exactly whether that's going to be part of the first bill or the second bill. So we're just getting a bit of a watch and brief and ear to the ground as to when that phasing will come out and what that might look like. We'll be certainly looking to put some information in front of the committee to get a position in submissions.
Councillor McDonald.
Thank you. Do you see the new government coming in the role that you're in here, the dual workload increasing? You know, with repealing stuff, there is associated with work associated with that. The community believe that we will be doing less and will be less done. So it's just a question about workload.
Through you, Madam Chair, it's going one direction, it's upwards. As new legislation comes in, we need to figure out organisation approach to giving effect to that legislation. Same with like some of the case law coming out. We need to understand how we best position the organisation to give effect to that legislation and be compliant with legislation, and where we can offer the best bang for buck and have the biggest impact. So, for example, the fast track approval legislation, the timeframe for consultation for regional councils is 5 days, which is really difficult to get a position across, whereas there's potential to have more influence in that process by working alongside some of those projects as they're building those projects up and getting ready to put them in. We can work alongside them and start to understand how we can leverage better benefits rather than putting more eggs in the consultation basket. So there is opportunities in that space to work smarter, but it is adding additional work to what we're up to.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Pemberton.
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. Much to Pete's question, mine's probably more the other end. What exposure to the ratepayers for on the ground implementation of these ground compliance? What exposure do we have as a council through these fast tracking processes?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, great question. It's unknown exactly how that compliance process is going to look. I presume that there is going to be a compliance function and the ability to recoup compliance costs through that process, but we're still a wee bit in the dark exactly what that's going to look like on the ground at this stage, but we're hopeful, and that was certainly one of the comments we raised in our submission around the costs of ensuring compliance. And we're also starting to unpack and think about the wider implications of, I guess, the fast track approvals process. What implication does that have on regional policy statements and regional direction and allocation of resources? Because you've got a two-speed process for allocating resource. You've got the fast track ministerial process and you've got a resource consenting process. So how do we figure out that allocation piece and everyone getting a fair go at the resource piece?
Thanks, Max. Sorry, I've just missed, Councillor, Chairman Horrell, sorry.
Yes, Madam Chair, I see, I think it's positive that on the dam regulations, they have dropped the 1 metre higher for the 40,000 storage. That may make it easier for people to put wetlands in, so I think that's positive. And just on the comment on staff, we're updating our RPS at the moment. We're looking at our region, our coastal plan. We're likely to be, NESs at some stage of this term are likely to come up together because they're quite conflicting. Our planning staff are going to be very busy going
forward. Councillor Rodway.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just looking at the RMA amendment bill, there's a couple of things there that are interesting. That the highly productive land MPS, talking about excluding land use class 3, that's land use class 3 is fairly sort of rolling, not flat highly productive land. What's the significance of that?
There will be quite a big impact of that on wider Southland. So there's quite a lot of land use class 3 land in Southland. So currently the national policy statement prevents subdivision of land
on that sort of land
use class 3. So it will be effectively removing some of those barriers to subdivision, such as succession farming, where you're chopping bits of farms off, leaving their house, and those sorts of subdivisions will become easier as part of this process. So we'll be keeping an eye on exactly any other nuances in that process as it tracks through.
And so it says minor freshwater changes, but I thought they were relatively significant.
For
farming, minor freshwater changes.
What page you on, Councillor?
It's on that big chart that you've got, the flow chart on page 2120.
I can't even read my printed copy. Yes, Lucy might be able to
just jump in.
illuminate.
I think one of the, so this, the flow chart through you shares from the ministry itself, and I think they're talking in kind of vague terms about what may or may not be in the second bill because they haven't figured it out yet, with the greatest respect. They've given an indication of what will be in the first one with more certainty now. We've had those announcements in the letter from Minister Bishop, but in terms of what remaining elements need to go into that second amendment bill, they're still seeking feedback on the detail of those. So I don't think they're expecting it to be a huge change, but I think that it will connect to their broader changes that they're talking about with the NPSFM and other national directions. So what might end up going in the amendment bill itself might be fairly minor, but it will be accompanied by that national direction, that broader suite of changes to the national direction is what we're currently, which will be
more than minor. Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair.
That's right. Was there anybody else? Just from me, Marcus, on page 25, the list of initiatives, etc., there's mention of the Climate Change Commission's work. Is that the meeting in Gore that's in a couple of weeks? Is it?
Monday.
Yeah. That we've had hardly any notice for, and they don't seem to be coming to Invercargill. Is that thing?
Yeah. I think it's 10 to 11 is 1 hour.
So we got an invite. The councillor's got an invite. That's that same work. I'm looking. Oh, interesting. Councillors all got an invite. Chairman Horrell, you had a comment in the.
Yes, well, I'm quite concerned that short notice, only with one meeting, I'm very worried that you've got a commission who's more urban focused, and we need to be able to have our say. I think we should probably suggest they have another meeting, because that's very short notice. We're going to have people there, but this is a big region, and it's how many other meetings have they had? It's one the lack of communication, the short time frame, and only one meeting for Southland.
And given that staff don't even seem to be aware of it, that's even more concerning. Councillor McPhail?
Can I ask, can we just find out through our stakeholders saying, who's actually been invited to the Gore agricultural hui? I never heard about it until we saw it come through. We obviously, the regional council is actually Federated Farmers heard. I want to know how they're engaging with the, is that where it's come from? But it's actually just understanding. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that this?
Well, we only got it through Morris and picking it
No,
up.
I got it from.
Bloody important people got it.
I have complete faith in your farming, understanding, as you can tell.
Madam Chair, if you had the time to read the report, which is very long and quite difficult to understand actually, it's about the proposals for reducing greenhouse gas emissions over the next, well, they're split into 5-year periods. So this is for the 24, I think, to 25 to 30 or 25 to 30, and then the ones in the future, and how we're going to get there, basically, the changes that are needed. It's it's a pretty important thing, and I'm a bit surprised that there's been limited notification of it, for sure. And I certainly agree with Chairman Horrell that perhaps maybe we can do that at this meeting. I don't know if you want to do it beforehand, say, this needs to be made a bit more available. People talk about bad public relations, but this is a good example of that.
Yeah, thanks.
Sorry, Chair, just add, there's been a number of examples of ministries, departments, central government agencies approaching yourselves directly and other politicians directly, and I think that's something we should take back, Chairman, to say it's all very, it's good that they've got initiative and they're out and they want to talk to people, but actually if staff don't know, staff can't support you and we can't get briefed and we can't share it with the community, et cetera, et cetera. So there is a broader need for us to go back to the commission and say, we would like another meeting first up, and also how come it didn't come into our through channels with staff. So, and I know that there's been a couple of other things that Wilma was picking up separately. So we'll take that away and have what we can do.
And maybe, Chairman, it needs to be discussed at the RSG level as well.
Yeah.
See if any of our colleagues have the same issue and this.
Make a couple of cell phone calls.
Yeah.
And find out, because obviously we've been moving throughout the countryside, but this is too important an issue not to.
Oh, that's right. And the broader issue of approaching councillors without including staff is something that RSG might be able to take us up on.
Problem session and go it's funny.
Yeah.
Self-defense hasn't heard about it.
Oh, really?
Oh, I know, but then again, who are they actually engaging? That's what I'm asking.
Okay, thanks for that. Sorry, didn't mean to drop the cat in. Any other questions for Marcus Woodard?
Just you.
Right, somebody like to move we receive the report. Thank you, councillor Cox, seconded councillor McPhail. All those in favour, please say aye. Thanks, carried. Thank you very much, team. And that takes us to an update on, which is the follow-up. Am I right? Yes, 9.5. The update on council requests and actions. It's pretty standard now. It's just showing the follow-up from questions previously. At least let me finish my sentence.
Yeah.
I also am hungry, councillor. And we've got a couple of items that will pop up from today's meeting in the next one. So, question, councillor?
I think that's quite a good item there. Is there any possibility that could be a standing item in this committee?
It will be now.
It will be now.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
And feel free to adopt it for your own committee if you wish.
So does that get recorded in the meeting, or can we have another pathway into it by contacting Rachel or
Well, it's currently lifted out of questions from councillors at the council meeting. So that's the best way. Or the committee meeting or whatever. That's the way. Yeah, it's just so that any actions that people request don't get lost because we.
What about running through all the other committees?
Well, I'm happy to lead by example. Feel free to speak to the relevant stuff. With that, we have a mover, I think, and seconded by councillor McPhail. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much. And then we have our extraordinary item that I nearly forgot. Thankfully, at least remind me, because I knew I would forget. Which is item 10. The supplementary report that we tabled earlier, the long-term plan consultation closing date extension. Quite a long recommendation. Rachel, do you want to say anything?
Well, just to note, this is the formalisation of the extension of the closing date. As I think has already been noted during the meeting, there has been increasing interest in the long-term plan, and in response to the request to extend the submission date, we've put in place that extra week, which will hopefully enable as many people as possible that want to have their say to put in their submission.
Yeah, it says, thank you, it says extending the closing date for submissions may impact upon the council's ability to adopt a long-term plan by 30th of June 2024. Presumably this doesn't.
So the week we waited up and felt that that still would enable us to carry on with the hearing on the 20th of May. If the result of a extension of the submission date is that we're absolutely drowned in submissions, we think that would, that's probably a positive thing, but it may mean we need to look at extending the hearing dates out, that sort of thing, which could flow on to extending adoption. We'll be aiming to meet the end of June, but it depends on how substantial the changes are that the council wish to make as a result of submissions and what those submissions are, obviously. I would note the 2021 LTP will be adopted in July as opposed to June, just to enable that full consideration of all the submissions, etc. process.
Thanks, Chair Horrell and then Councillor McDonald.
Yes, Madam Chairman, obviously I'm very supportive of we've listened to the public, we've given them an extra week, which I think will give most people the time to put a submission if they wish to. We were asked to put up the LTP altogether or to give a month, which is definitely, we've got timeframes we have to actually deal with. But I think this is a good move. We've actually listened to the public, said we need a little bit more time, but a little more time, an extra week is quite a long time. So I'm happy to move the recommendations.
Thanks, I'll just hold that until I've heard from Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to be really clear. So what you're saying, Rachel, is the week is the maximum we can extend it without incurring risk of not adopting by that June date. So that's quite clear of what you're saying. And there is a petition running around the province, as I'm aware of, read in the media, about postponing this LTP for 1 year. Is that unrealistic legally? What sort of position would that put us in?
So to respond to your first question first, the process from here on is we receive submissions, we hold the hearings, there's deliberations and council directs changes to be made to the long-term plan as a result of that. Those changes then need to be made and all of their documentation assessed by auditors, and then it all comes back up to you for adoption as the final long-term plan. So we felt a week was the maximum that we could have at this stage and still work through that process in accordance with the statutory timeframes. In terms of the second question, yes, there have been requests that we delay the long-term plan for a year. Some of that may be around confusion with what the territorial authorities are able to do as a result of Three Waters. They have been given the ability to defer their long-term plans and instead adopt an annual plan. Either regional councils don't have that ability, so we are required to adopt our long-term plan by the 30th of June.
Thank you.
Good question, good answer. Clear answer. Councillor Guyton.
Thank you. Yeah, I've got a question about late submissions and whether the council has a firm position on this or whether it's discretionary. Given that if we're offering a further week, how does that affect our view of late submissions? I've been through this before and it's never been clear to me how those decisions are weighed up. Do we have a process?
Through you, Chair, again, so in the past it has been our practice to accept late submissions where we are able to and still put them into the packs of information that go to council for consideration. Clearly, there's a very short turnaround between the close off of the 13th of May and the hearing starting on the 20th, and we'll be wanting to get the full set of submissions out to you as soon as possible after the close off. So we will probably have much less ability than we've had in the past around late submissions. Don't know if that answers the question.
Partly.
Just on that, Madam Chair, in the past, it has been a motion of council to either accept or not. And in the past, we've had some of them just over the date, we've always accepted them. But acknowledging what Rachel said about timeframes, but that has always been a governance decision, whether to accept them or not.
Yeah, there's a formal resolution that comes through, so the ability to make a decision either way.
We'll move the recommendation, Mr Chair, unless it's already been done.
And seconded councillor Evans. All those in favour, please say aye. Thank you, everybody. That does bring us to the end of the strategy and policy meeting for today. I will just close off with a karakia. Kia whakaaria te tapu, kia turuki whakataha ai, kia turuki whakataha ai, kia wātea ai te ara, hauie, huie, tai kie. Thank you, everybody, for your spirited discussions today. Enjoy your lunch.
We'll just